Great. So welcome everyone to our December 1st Friday, December 2024, with Christmas jumpers being an absolute requirement. And I can see that, the memo has either been ignored or didn't get there basically. But yeah, it's the last. So for anyone watching the recording, it's December 2024, hence the Christmas jumpers by Jen and I. And it's our last first Friday of 2024, which is quite startling. But we are delighted to have Jen Chapman as our guest. And Jen is here to talk to us about a topic that's really important in terms of franchise networks, which is mental health and resilience and well-being. And hopefully, as we're looking towards the new year, techniques and methods to help people feel better about themselves. And generally, my experience is if people feel better about themselves, they also feel better about whatever they're doing in terms of the business. So welcome, Jen, and I'll pass over to you, and the floor is yours.
Lovely, thank you very much. I did nearly have my little girl's reindeer antlers on for real festive thing, but I'm really glad I didn't now because I think I think I'd have looked quite silly. So I think I've saved myself a little bit of embarrassment there. So I have got a PowerPoint that I'm going to share with you guys today, but please also know that it's not going to be total kind of death by PowerPoint, and please feel free to kind of chip in and ask questions as we go. Can you see my screen there and my mouse wiggling? Because it's on the other side. So if I look away, I haven't gotten distracted. It's my screen. So thank you so much for having me today and for all joining me on your Friday. So as Julie said, I'm here to talk to you all about mental health and well-being. So initially, I just wanted to introduce myself, I guess. So I have been in franchising for about 10 years. Like a lot of people, it happened by accident. So I started working with a franchise as a part-time job while I was at uni, so with the head office. From then, I've moved into various roles within franchising. So I've had kind of what I deem as a really interesting insight into the world of franchising because I've seen it from, I think, every single bit now. So I worked with the BFA during the pandemic, which was wild, but in a good way. I have worked in franchise head offices. I've worked with franchisees on a local level. I partner for the BFA for mental health and wellbeing. I have just won the eWIF award for Supplier of the Year, which is incredibly exciting. And when my little girl was 6 months old, I decided then would be the perfect time to also become a franchisee. I don't know why I thought that would be a good time, but there we are. I think I felt like I could do anything. So I became a franchisee for a children's mental health and wellbeing class. So we deliver those to primary schools. Because I think so. I work with my husband, which was probably, again, a potentially interesting choice for well-being, but we do it as a husband and wife partnership. So he is a psychotherapist for the NHS, and so we go into primary schools and deliver classes to children to give them this toolbox from when they're a child to learn what feelings are, what emotions are, how they are in the body, how to recognize others. Because having both of us worked with adults in terms of mental health, we both agree that actually, if a lot of these adults had those skills when they were children and honed them over the years, things could be very, very different. Because one of the key things for me is that mental health and looking after your well-being should not be complicated. It shouldn't be complex. It should be easy to do. It should be easy to be part of your normal life. So things shouldn't be complicated. And the ways that you look after it for yourself and for your franchise network or for your business if you're a franchisee also doesn't have to be complex and expensive either. What we're really talking about is getting the basics right and doing it consistently. That's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. The reason that I chose to work in mental health and wellbeing is partly from my own sort of lived experience. So I have OCD. Looking back, I recognise symptoms from when I was probably about 7 years old of OCD that I didn't know of then, but have always then managed a fairly high level of anxiety, to be honest. But over the last few years, have learned a lot more about it and learned a lot more skills and coping mechanisms that mean that anxiety isn't massively something I even feel nowadays, which if you said that to me a few years ago, I wouldn't have believed you whatsoever. Um, but I think hopefully that's kind of, I'm living proof that you can go from a really kind of delicate, nervous, anxious person to using these daily habits and tools to make you actually fairly resilient and able to do stuff like this. Like I'll get up and talk to sort of 200 people now on a stage about resilience, which if you had said that a few years ago, I would have probably laughed in your face and then potentially cried. So things have moved on a lot since then. With that also, whilst I was at the BFA, I worked there during the pandemic. And as you can imagine, it was an incredibly challenging time. And I really saw the role of a franchisor evolve completely. So before the pandemic, it was very much supporting in terms of business growth, network growth. And then throughout the pandemic, saw firsthand the experience of franchisors change into much more of a personal role. So I spoke to so many franchisor members who would say, you know, I'm having frequent conversations with franchisees and it's all about their well-being and how they are, and I don't know how to have that conversation. So franchisors were having to support their franchisees on a much more personal level, but didn't necessarily have the know-how or confidence to spot that something was perhaps wrong and know what to do about it. So how to safely and effectively guide people to the right support. So that's why I decided to retrain. That also along with these statistics. So I know stats don't get everyone going, but I think they're pretty interesting. So wanted to share these with you. I will shut up for a few seconds and just let you have a read of those. So these stats for me, even when I've read them several times, I still find them quite shocking. When I tell people what I do, I often get told that it's a nice to have, or that's a good buzzword at the moment, or people see it as a bit of a soft snowflake thing to do. I'm told with kind of my generation is how it's often seen. But actually, I think these statistics hopefully show very, very clearly in green and white as we have here that actually that's a very different story. There's nothing soft or snowflakey about these statistics. And I've spoken to countless franchisors who have lost franchisees to mental health, either because their franchisees decided they just couldn't do it anymore, or I've spoken to a shocking amount who have actually lost franchisees to suicide. And I don't mean to start this session as a total doom and gloom because it doesn't have to be that way at all. But I think I want to kind of get across the seriousness of mental health in business. You know, it's not supporting franchisees or looking after yourself if you are a franchisee. It's not a wishy-washy soft thing to do. It's something that as an industry, we have a responsibility to look after, I believe. Particularly if you're in a position as a franchisor, you're getting people into your network and you have a real opportunity to make a very powerful difference. So I've spoken to some franchisors who have said, well, it's nothing to do with me. You know, it's not my responsibility to look after them. They're not an employee, which I get, you know, legally you have different obligations. But aside from even the moral perspective, it actually makes good business sense too. So you can see from the stats here how many working days are lost due to mental health. It's over 60% of the time that people are off for back pain is actually mental health, whether they know that or whether that's because of their sort of body letting them down. Um, there's a massive impact of mental health in business and in franchising. And I think that together we've got such a huge potential to do something about it for the better. So these NHS waiting lists, I think we've got a fantastic service. So I'm not about to NHS bash whatsoever. But the reality is the waiting list is ginormous. So it's taking around 18 months for people to get access to professional support via the NHS at the moment for mental health, which is huge. And I think what we can do together is empower ourselves and empower franchisees so that actually we can help to bridge that gap. So, not saying that our support is going to replace the support of professionals within the NHS or private, but actually we can help to bridge that gap in between. Any questions so far? Do those stats surprise anyone?
Yeah, I was going to say I don't have a question, but those stats definitely shocked me, especially the like the last one as well, particularly around like suicide. But again,
Yeah,
in bringing in from like a small business point of view, like for us in particular as franchisor, we all of our franchisees are small business owners. They pretty much all work into like just them, and they might have small teams. So,
yeah.
for me, this like these sort of things are quite it's quite eye-opening, really.
Yeah, I think that stat is huge. So it's around 6,500 is the average number of people that we're losing every year to suicide. And it's generally about 4 to 1 men to women. So like franchising is still very much a male dominated industry. And I think actually we absolutely have a massive responsibility there or opportunity to make a difference and help, particularly with business owners. So yeah, I'll carry on, otherwise I'll keep talking about statistics and no one wants that on a Friday, do they? So let's move on a bit. So normally with any of these kind of things, you're told to put your phone away, but I'd like us to do a little bit of interactivity. So you don't have to put your face on screen, don't worry. But if you can get your phone out and scan this QR code, I would be incredibly grateful. If anybody's watching the recording, don't worry about doing this because this bit's live, but you can still look at all of the results that come in. Okay, is everybody on? Think, yeah. Okay, fab. Right, let's move forward then. So I'm going to ask you a question. This is completely anonymous, so please answer honestly. Your name won't suddenly pop up to say that you've experienced challenges, don't worry. When I do say challenges with mental health, I don't necessarily mean a diagnosable mental health condition, but it can be that you face challenges with stress, overwhelm, things like that. Okay. Fab. Okay. So I think that shows you quite clearly that mental health is something that impacts so many more of us than we perhaps realise. So the current statistic, just to give you another one, is 1 in 4 adults will experience a mental health challenge at some point in their lives. Personally, I would suggest that it's more like 4 in 4. It's just to different degrees. So when we talk about poor mental health, it doesn't have to be a diagnosed mental health condition. Poor mental health can be anything as you are having a really challenging week, month, and you're really having to dig deep to be resilient to get yourself through. There's nothing weak about that. There's no kind of challenge, difficulty in that. That's just life, isn't it? Because life isn't always easy. So really, I think it's just to show that actually mental health and challenges within mental health is incredibly prevalent in whatever kind of role you are or whatever demographic you have. So next question then, what skills and qualities do you think you need to run a successful business? So on the app here, you should be able to type in your responses. So this can be, what do franchisees need? What do franchisors need? Resilience, commitment, drive, yeah. Grit and determination, absolutely. Resilience, resourcefulness, another resilience, definitely. Communication, commitment, hard work, numeracy, literacy, absolutely. Leadership, adaptability, confidence, drive, ambition. Communication, another resilience, I couldn't agree more. Understanding, creativity, absolutely. So that's an awful lot of skills that we need, isn't it? Positive mental attitude, absolutely. Knowing when to stop, yeah, definitely. That's a really interesting one. So those are kind of a lot of the common skills that we need to be able to run a successful business. So what I would like you to do now is think of yourself on a really good day. So that day where you've gotten out of on the right side of the bed. So you feel great, things feel like they're all working, things feel really positive. Can you imagine yourself on that day? Yeah? Okay, cool. So if you think about those things that are all on the screen now, how much more present do they seem in your day or in your character? So when you're in a good mood, when you've gotten out on the right side of the bed, you probably feel a lot more committed to what you're doing. You've probably got a lot more drive, right? You probably feel a lot more adaptable. You're probably a lot more ambitious. So what you think you're able to achieve is probably a lot more than when you're not getting out on the right side of the bed, so to speak. So now have a think about the other way. So I'm not necessarily thinking about if you've had a diagnosable mental health condition, but on those days when things feel really hard, you perhaps feel a bit anxious, maybe you feel low, maybe you feel a bit angry. Think of yourself in that headspace. And then I want to think about your levels of resilience. So how resilient do you feel on that day? How much ambition do you have on that day? It's certainly a lot lower, isn't it? So all of those things that we need to have, we know we need to have as a business owner, actually, they are so much harder to bring to your business when your mental health is suffering. So just in case nobody took part in my interactivity bit there, I did some examples. And so I came up with, very similar to you guys, actually, a successful business owner has resilience, confidence. I won't read all of them out, but a lot of them are repetitions of what you've said, which is great. So as a business owner, even if you are someone who outsources a lot, if you have a big team, you still have that overarching responsibility. And often as a business or as a franchisor, we'll think, right, we need to prioritize sales and marketing because that's what's going to generate growth. But actually, you could do the best sales and marketing training for your network, or if you're a franchisee, you could take part in the best sales and marketing training. But if you aren't there within your mental health, so you're not feeling resilient or confident, and you don't have that self-belief, it's almost not worth doing it. Because you could be taught the best sales and marketing activity, but if you haven't got that personal quality to bring to it, you may as well not do it. The reason that I'm saying that today is because what I want us to try and get to a point in as a franchise industry is to tilt that shift of prioritization. So thinking of you as an individual, whether you are the franchisor or your franchisee, as that central cog that's going to turn everything else. Because without you as the franchisor or you as the franchisee, without that turning well, that cog turning well, the other bits aren't going to go. So you could have the best cogs around it for sales, marketing, all of that kind of stuff that we need as a business. But if that central cog isn't turning fluidly, isn't turning well, it's just not going to happen. So we know that poor mental health has the power to impact all of these things. So I've split it out into 3 columns. So the first one is our kind of emotional, mental state. The middle one is our physical health. And the third is our business health. So like I said before, what I want us to do is try and shift that priority so that you, either as the franchisor or the franchisee, make yourself the priority ahead of anything else in your business. Because if you are going well, everything else is going to. So if we stick with that middle one, so that physical health column, for some people that haven't experienced poor mental health before, it may well be that actually you don't recognize some of those emotional mental changes. It may well be that mental health challenges for you present as physical changes to your body. So everybody is familiar with the fight or flight system, yeah? So essentially what happens here is we can go into fight or flight or even freeze mode. So if you are a franchisor with franchisees, you will have absolutely seen this, where some of your franchisees just seem to suddenly be doing nothing. Sometimes it might be because they've checked out, but sometimes it may well be because they're going through this kind of decision paralysis thing. It's another aspect of fight or flight, is that it's not that they can't be bothered to do anything, but their stress levels are at such a high point that they just don't know what to do next. They cannot see any step forward. So essentially, in terms of evolution, whilst we've obviously progressed a lot, there are some bits that actually we really haven't fully progressed from. So any kind of stress that sort of is flagged to our body, our brain, the brain perceives as a threat of danger and a potential threat to life. So the biological response there is to go into life preservation mode. Our mind hasn't evolved enough yet to recognize that actually that stress has come from an email. And so actually it doesn't need to flood your body with blood to make your limbs be able to fight or run away, because actually what you need to do is sit there and type. But our body and brain haven't evolved enough yet to know that not all threats of danger are a threat of life. Some of them are just stress. Does that make sense? I feel like I've butchered that explanation a little bit, sorry. But so what happens is our body goes into this self-preservation mode, and our body is only capable of running so many systems. So we have about 11 systems as bodily functions. And when our fight or flight one is engaged, that's our sympathetic nervous system. So it's the sympathetic nervous system that is responsible for releasing cortisol, adrenaline, everything that your body physically needs, so that all of that blood and oxygen is pushed to your limbs so that you can engage either the fight, so actually fighting with someone, or flight, which is legging it. Either way, your limbs need blood and oxygen. To be able to give everything to the sympathetic nervous system, your body's actually capable of shutting down other systems within your body. So it will shut down your digestive system, which is why people have, there's such a strong correlation between IBS and anxiety, because your body gets that threat of danger. Your body perceives it as a threat to life. So it's like, right, we're giving everything to preserve life here. And then what it does is say, right, we need to give everything to preserving our life. So actually we'll shut down some of these other symptoms, these other systems in our body. Same with the immune system. So your body will be like, right, we need to preserve life. We're going to give it everything to that. And so it will completely slow down your immune system, which is why typically when you're anxious or stressed, you'll also get a cold. Or when you go on holiday, that's when you get a cold, because your body has been in that sympathetic nervous system mode. And then actually when that starts to ease and the parasympathetic nervous system takes over, your body is then like, right, okay, we can give back some energy to the other systems in our body. It will give some to your immune system. And that's when your immune system thinks, right, okay, we can try and fight this cold now. So it entirely shuts things down. So the reason I talk about all of this stuff is partly because I think it's really interesting, but also because actually it shows just how much we do need to prioritize mental health within our business, because it's not just about how you think and feel. And mental health isn't about, feeling happy. It's about being able to function and function at your best. Like positive mental health to me isn't about being happy all the time, because that's weird, isn't it? If you were happy all the time, that's quite honestly, that's weird. That's not a normal thing. If something bad happens, you should be sad. or you should be worried. That's a normal response to a situation that's happened. And so when we talk about looking after mental health and well-being, we're not talking about making people soft, which I think is what I've had the response from some franchisors before, is that they don't want to protect and cushion people because they need to look after themselves. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's about empowering people to being able to recognize difficult emotions, sit with them, and then importantly, move on. So it's having that level of self-awareness, which is going to help us to increase any sort of resilience as a franchisor or as a franchisee. Anybody have any questions about that bit? No?
No,
Cool.
but it's amazing, Jen. Honestly, the information is just it's all kind of starts to fall into place and make loads of sense. So yeah, it's really, really amazing. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. It's I think the puzzle bits kind of go together, don't they? I think
Yeah.
so. It's mental health isn't just this nice to have when you've got a bit of time and budget left over. Actually, it's the cog that's going to help keep your business going. Same for
Yeah.
your franchisees.
Good. And it's good to know I'm not the only person who gets cold when I go away on holiday.
No, not at all. Absolutely. It's your body doing its thing. So, like I said, it's not all doom and gloom. I appreciate that everything I've said so far has probably sounded fairly negative and scary, but actually, I'm very much what's the word? An advocate of being proactive. Part of that is because I have OCD, so I am a control freak. But the other part of it is because actually, if you're being proactive, you're not waiting for your mental health to drop. You're not waiting for that point that actually you feel like rubbish. You're doing something before that even happens. So, like this quote says, I really love this one. If you're proactive, you focus on preparing. If you're reactive, you end up focusing on repairing. So, a lot of the time when I speak with franchisors and when I come in to do some work with them, it's after something's happened. There's nothing wrong with that because a franchisor is then trying to do something about it. There's not a bit of me that's knocking that. But what I really want us to do as an industry is to work on improving things before they get to that point. So rather than waiting until one of your franchisees feels like they need to leave because things are too hard or their business is starting to fail, or you as a franchisor just can't take it anymore, let's do something before that so that it doesn't get to that point. Because I also think life is just too short to feel like rubbish. And you should enjoy it. Like the vast majority of us have gone into this, whether it's self-employment as a supplier like me, whether it's a franchisee or franchisor, you've done it to get the most out of your life so that you can enjoy life and have that balance that you wanted. So we should be enjoying it and giving ourselves and each other the best chance to do that. So what things can we actually do? So I'm not going to sit here today and give a load of different tools and techniques, partly because I would keep you here all day if I did that, but also because we're all so different. So there are so many different techniques and tools that work for you and for your demographic of franchise network. So there is no right or wrong as to what will help you. It's really about finding your niche. So from a personal level, over the last sort of 4 or 5 months, I've started to get up at 5 a.m. And that, for me, has been the most incredible thing for my mental health and well-being. It's been amazing. If you say that to someone else, the thought of getting up at 5 a.m. might make them feel sick. And I get it. I totally get that. I'm a mum of a toddler. So if someone told me that I needed to get 10 hours sleep, I would laugh in their face because that's not going to happen. So there's no one size fits all for mental health and well-being. There's not one thing you can do as a franchisee or for your network. It's about finding what that niche is for that individual. So my tips for franchisors would be, remember how important the person is even after the recruitment stage. And I think this is so important because having worked with franchisors in a head office sort of environment, you put so much emphasis on finding that right person. You think about what qualities they have. You think about what they're going to bring to it. You think about whether you will get on with them as a person. So there is so much that is put into the individual at recruitment stage. And then very often, not for every network at all, but very often once they come into the network and they launch their business, the emphasis fully shifts on how their business is performing. So how's their sales and marketing? What's their growth plan? What are their numbers? Which is all obviously important. It's a business at the end of the day. But sometimes the perspective of who the individual is goes once they become a franchisee. So rather than seeing them as an individual, as a person, like people do when they do the recruitment stage, it's then seeing them as a franchise territory. So it's taking out that person element. So one of the key things that you can do is always keep them as a person at the heart of what you're doing. Review or outline all of the touch points that you have with your franchisees. So have a look at every point of communication that you have with them. And I'm not suggesting that mental health and wellbeing needs to feature in every single one of them. It's not always going to be appropriate or needed. But if you're having quarterly reviews, annual reviews, does mental health and wellbeing feature as a formal part of that? Because what we want to do is have that consistency, but also that genuine care in how someone's feeling. So one of the core skills within mental health and supporting someone else is empathy. If you could have any other skill, or if you can have any skill in terms of mental health support, it's developing empathy. The difference between empathy and sympathy is that empathy involves having a greater connection with how someone is actually feeling and having that genuine, authentic care about it. So empathy doesn't mean you have to feel what they're feeling, but it means that you appreciate how they are feeling. And so what we want to do is throughout that kind of timeline of connections with your franchisees, it's thinking about, can I feature wellbeing in this in a consistent way? The next one is flip the mindset and approach, which I've kind of talked about already, but it's thinking that when you support franchisees' mental health and wellbeing, you're not doing them a favor. You're not necessarily even going above and beyond. Yes, it's a great thing to do, of course it is, but actually you're doing the best thing to support their business, which ultimately for you as a franchisor is going to help you and the overall network. So it's flipping that mindset that it's not like a nice to have luxury, actually it's a business necessity. The next one is to get informed. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. As a little shameless plug for myself, I deliver mental health first aid training, which is an accredited training course recognised by the Department of Health and Social Care, and it's a great way to build that foundation of knowledge. If that's not something that you want to or can do at the moment, that is of course fine. There are plenty of other ways that you can go and educate yourself around mental health. The next one is to empower your franchisees from day one. So that is all about letting them know the roller coaster they're about to go on. So anybody who has recruited franchisees here will know that they go on this roller coaster, don't they? I know from being in head office and being a franchisee myself that you start up here with that immense excitement. You know, you're going to change the world, you're going to change your life. You're so excited, you're right up here. Then you actually finish your training and you have to do it on your own. So you dip right down here because it's terrifying. You actually have to do it. Maybe there's a few months where you're not earning an income. So you're right down here. Then you get that first sale. You shoot up to here because you're ecstatic. Things are working. You knew it would. Then you dip a bit because you have to pay your franchisor. And you have this argument in your head of, why am I paying them? I could do it on my own. And then actually they help you and you realize why. So you come back up here and then things start to peter out. So empowering your franchisees to know they're going to go on that emotional roller coaster, whatever their background is, they will go on it, is great. So empower them to know that they're going to go on it and help them to identify tools that they can use that will help to not eliminate those ups and downs of the roller coaster because they're still going to be there, but make them feel less intense. The next one is to introduce a wellbeing policy. So if you operate a franchise network and you don't have a wellbeing policy, I would urge you to create one. It's brilliant for your franchisees and for you because you're setting out expectations and boundaries. They know how they can get support. You know, because you've set out in black and white what your support is going to look like. The final one then is to review, create, and communicate your own boundaries. So as a franchisor, you have a massive sense of responsibility of supporting all of these people in your franchise network. You need to look after your own mental health and well-being as well. So whenever I talk about this, it's not just looking after other people. All of the stuff we've talked about today applies to you as a franchisor as well. You know, the better that you are feeling, the better your mental health and well-being is, the better that you will also perform as a franchisor, as a leader. Then to franchisees. So for franchisees, it's remembering how important you are to your business. So I speak to so many people at franchise conferences. So I'll go and deliver workshops and things like that. And people will have been in business for sort of 10 years and they will have these kind of, not necessarily from me, but they will have these realizations at some point within that journey that actually, if they look after themselves, their business performs better. And I can't remember who came up with this story. So I want to say that I'm crediting it to someone. It's not myself, but I can't remember who it is, if I'm being honest. But they basically said that imagine if you had a machine within your business that made money. So imagine you had a machine that printed money. Imagine how well you would treat that machine. You would give it like the best oil. You can see how untechnically engineering minded I am, but you would give it the best conditions. It would be in the perfect temperature. It would be in the best lighting. It would have all of the perfect conditions, this machine, wouldn't it? But actually, generally, that machine that makes money in a business is you, the franchisee. There's someone just commented to say who credited that story. I can't see the comments.
No, it says, where would we find a wellbeing policy? Is there some sort of example
okay.
template, whatever?
Yeah, I can send you a template. So I can send you one that's editable. That's absolutely fine. It gives you a solid foundation for it. I thought someone was going to ask where you can find one of those money printing machines. I was going to say, you tell me. I don't know.
Yeah, we are one of those, Jen.
Yeah, then I would be incredibly rich. So it's really knowing how important you are for your business. And actually, if you are thriving, then your business will as well. Secondly, if you're not yet a franchisee, but you're thinking of becoming one, find a franchisor that takes practical steps to support you as a person. So before committing to joining a franchise, find out what they do to support you past sales and marketing. How do they support you as an individual to find those things that you want from your life? So the reason that you've decided to become a franchisee, it may well be a better work-life balance. It may well be to have more kind of job satisfaction, whatever it is. Find a franchisor who's going to work with you to help you achieve that. And then the final one for franchisees is to invest time in your business to prioritize yourself. Because it's all well and good that we work out what works for us, but unless you actually make time, carve out time as you would to work on your business strategy, it's not really doing anything, is it? You can't just find out what works, you have to actually do it. Then the next one is for everyone. So franchisee, franchisor, supplier, whoever you are. One of the best things I think you could do is find out your motivator in life. So when I was at uni, we had this personal development module, and at the time I remember thinking what a load of rubbish it was, and it was just taking up my time. I had better things to do, and I found it so annoying. Now, with 10 years of hindsight, I realised that I was naive and ignorant, and actually it was such a useful task to do. What I will do is pop in the chat a link to a quiz. It takes about 5 minutes, but it gives you a motivator score on like 8 different elements within life. And the reason I say that is because once you know your motivator in life, if you can work towards achieving that, your mental health and well-being is going to be so much better. Because actually, is anybody familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs model? that
Yeah, I
triangle.
am.
Yeah, so it starts with the basics and it works its way up to self-actualization. So self-actualization, that top point of the triangle, looks different for every single person. Your self-actualization is really that motivator in life. So self-actualization is reaching your full potential. Your full potential is going to be dependent on what you think is your full potential. It's subjective. So I'll pop that link in. I've got it on here. So I'll put it in the chat before we go. The next one is to find out more about yourself and how you tick. I appreciate getting to know yourself probably sounds a bit woo-woo, but actually, the more you know yourself and the more you know what makes you cross, what makes you feel proud, the better. So self-awareness really is the absolute foundation to mental health and well-being. You can't really go anywhere until you have that piece. So there's a quiz called the 16 personalities quiz, and I'm going to pop that in the chat as well. It gives you your personality score and it gives you a full personality report. It's creepy how well it describes you, but it gives you really good descriptors on like your strengths and your weaknesses. So I will send that to you as well. If you want to, you could even use that as at the recruitment stage within franchising, not to say yes or no as to whether someone can join your network, but to get to know your franchisees better. Because the more you know them, the better you're going to be able to support them too. With that, it's knowing what works for you in a preventative manner for mental health. So what is it that prevents you from feeling like rubbish? And what is it that works for you to pull you out of that if you do? So that resilience piece, what is it that helps you to dig deep and be able to get out of that challenge? So have a think about the times that you felt great. Why is that? What was going on in your life, in your business, in your surroundings? Then think about a time that you faced real challenge in your life. What was it that enabled you to pick yourself up and carry on? And then the final one is appreciate the basics and what it can do and how you can fit them into your daily life. I'm not going to go through them right now because I think that's probably, I can't remember what the phrase is, but it's something about eggs. What is that phrase?
Teaching your grandmother how to suck eggs.
Thank you. I knew it was something about eggs, but I thought if I try and say it now, I'm really going to embarrass myself, and I can't even blame mum brain anymore because my little girl's 18 months.
Well, I'm
But
glad
that
that's
one.
the one it was, Jen, anyway, because otherwise...
That's the one I had in my head. So I don't want to tell you the things that you already know you should be doing. You know you should be drinking water, eating well, moving, having those connections. You know you should be doing that. So I'm not going to list them here. But the key thing is how can you get those things to fit into your day already? So it's called habit stacking. And it's basically thinking about what do you do already in your day? What do you do every day? Things like brushing your teeth, having a shower, and how can you attach a healthy habit onto something you already do? If you do that, you're far more likely to stick to a new one. And that's about it. The final thing I want to say is that your brain will do as it's told. So, as someone who has always experienced very high amounts of anxiety until probably a few years ago, I would never have believed this because I would always think that my brain is in control of me. But actually, once you master these, I'm not saying I have mastered them at all, but once you get to know these different tools that can help shift that sort of control, it can be incredibly life-changing. That your anxiety, your low mood, your stress levels don't have to control you. You can absolutely control them. And once you control them, your actions and behaviors and everything else as a result will fall in line. That's it.
Great.
I don't know if I'm too early, but
No,
if you
honestly,
have
Jen,
questions,
yeah, if you could just
then
maybe
please feel
take
free.
your share off and then we can see
Absolutely.
everyone. That would be great. I've got a question, so I'm gonna, we always get lots of questions, but I'm gonna kick off to begin with. So, based upon what you've just said, and there's been like absolutely loads of really great stuff and say information and education and thinking. I mean, I agree with you. I think the franchise sector has changed significantly over the last 5 to 10 years in terms of where we are and what we do and how we do it in relation to, you know, well-being, etc. What I don't think we do is, I don't think we actually project that as part of our recruitment. So I
Yes.
think we talk about, we've got great systems, we've got, you know, added value, we've got all of that. But I don't think, I mean, again, I'll open this up to other people on the call. I don't think I've actually ever seen anyone in their recruitment documentation say, you know, we look after your well-being, basically.
Yeah,
Unless
it's a really good point because, and actually, so I was at a conference a little while ago where there was a massive survey done as to what people expect now from an employer. So this was an employee-employer situation, so slightly different, but it was essentially saying the findings were that those who are probably of like the grad school age, that generation, what they're expecting from future employees as standard is financial education. So well-being was like, that was way as expected, like how I would expect if I was an employee to have days off. But they also now expect financial education and support. And I think that just shows you how much things are changing. Like for me, my generation, I'm only 31, I wouldn't think that my employer should give that to me as standard.
yeah,
But that shows kind of how the landscape and expectations of people are changing.
yeah. And do you think that in terms of, if you like, within the franchise sector, do you think we are actually leading the way in relation to other small businesses? Because we should be. And the fact that we've got the knowledge, we've got the understanding. Obviously, we've got more knowledge now than we had, you know, an hour ago, basically. But we should be, if we compare ourselves to a business owner that starts a business from scratch, we should be, you know, much more effective, efficient, understanding in terms of the need for, you know, mental well-being, basically. Do you see any differences?
I think probably in terms of loneliness, that level is probably lower, but there's not actually that many stats around mental health and wellbeing in franchising. So next year, so I'm not sure if anyone is aware, but I'm working with BFA to do the very first National Franchise Wellbeing Week. So ahead of that, I'm actually going to launch a survey for the franchise industry to find out more about mental health so we could get some of those stats for our own industry. I think the loneliness scores are probably better than standalone small business owners, but I think the challenges faced are exactly the same. And although it is changing, it's at a much slower rate than it needs to be.
Right, great. Okay, thank you. Opening to questions.
Just going to pop those links in as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Questions, comments, thoughts, views from the Zoom?
Julie, can you hear me?
Simon? Yeah.
You knew it was coming. No, I really enjoyed that presentation. It's a real eye-opener. But I guess in terms of the industry, I mean, how many franchisors inherently feel they're obliged to look after their franchisees' mental health over and above the business, you know, because ultimately it's a business to business relationship, isn't it? And I'm just trying to think how we knit that into the context of that relationship. Yes, I think if you're an employer and you have employees, that is fundamental and paramount to your role as an employer. But how does that transition to the franchisee relationship? Because, as I said, at the heart of it is a business to business relationship. And I'm not sure how you manage that migration or that responsibility on the part of the franchisor, because as a franchisor, I don't want to do so much that I'm perceived to be the employer, you know, which can cause you problems, particularly in litigation and things like that as well. So how do you strike the balance? Is my question, and I think it's not an easy one. I don't think it's an easy one to answer.
No, it's sorry.
I'll just come on that first before to let you kind of give us some thought from your point of view. But as we've been on the event, you know, one of my colleagues on here today, Amy, who looks after some of the docs that we produce, has just been messaging saying we need to do more of this. you know, we, in our role as working with new companies that we're taking through the franchising process, some of it historically and still is about educating them that yes, they do need to provide financial support in terms of, you know, financial awareness and management training. That people often say, I don't need to do anything in terms of finances because it's their business. And actually we
Yeah.
need to say, no, you do, because if you
Yeah.
don't, it's a black hole. It's just going to get bigger.
Yeah. I mean, I get that.
Start on that.
I can see it as being an important function of the field-based franchise support manager, where they've got 20 franchisees that they're looking after. Maybe that's the upskilling that's required from a franchising point of view. So the person that's actually out in the field talking on a one-to-one basis with a franchisee can have those additional skills that would offer it as an opportunity. I mean, that's the best touch point. You know, as I said, when I was a franchisee, I had a really good relationship with my area manager. So we could talk about things, and we did talk about things that were outside of the business, you know, personal things that were having an impact. So maybe the role then is to get those individuals better trained and better aware of, you know, some of the skills and techniques for coaching and talking to people.
Yeah, and I think again, if it goes right back to the actual, you know, it's built into the model. It's built into the model, it's built into the induction training, it's built into the ongoing support. So again, it's about creating knowledge, awareness and expectations. I mean, I'm not going to pass over to you, Jen, but, you know, and I think Simon, there's a story of the KFC or whatever, that they had a very simple 100 checkpoint system where their field staff went in and basically went, are your toilets clean? Yes. Are your windows clean? Yes. Have you got stock in? Yes. And the more ticks there were on the box of the 100, the better the performance of the business, because it was very simple, straightforward, but effective. So again, on there, from a field support point of view, the final question should be, you know, how are you? How are you feeling? Etc. Anyway, Jen, sorry, over to you.
No problem. And it is a tricky question. You're right, and I think so. I would say there's probably 3 points of an answer. So one of them is actually to empower the franchisee with that, so that actually the responsibility doesn't bear on the franchisor in terms of that, like you were saying about having that almost the employer responsibility, is actually giving the franchisee the skills and the know-how to spot signs in themselves and do things proactively. So to have those tools in their toolkit literally from day one. So from the moment they sign their contract, they know how to look after themselves properly. And then they're not having to rely on their franchise support team or their franchisor, because actually they've grown those skills themselves. The second one would be that, yes, you're completely right. It's the franchise support manager who is the best person to upskill with this training. So they need to have, I think it's fair for your franchise support teams to have the knowledge, the skills, and ultimately the confidence to have that conversation. So if they're speaking with a franchisee that is perhaps not performing that well, actually it's having that insight that maybe it's not because of an attitude problem or because they can't be bothered. Maybe there's something more going on, and having the confidence to start that conversation around mental health and knowing that they're guiding them to support that is safe and is going to be effective. Then I think the final bit is, you mentioned about it being that it's ultimately it's a business to business relationship. And I think that's the fundamental one for me, is that we need to start seeing mental health as part of the business fundamental. So like we saw right at the start, you cannot expect yourself to have any of those qualities like confidence, resilience, ambition, drive, if your mental health isn't there. So actually, it's totally shifting that perspective, that it's not an additional to a business to business relationship. It's a fundamental part of it, because there's not one of us in this room or the whole industry that doesn't have mental health. You know, just like physical health, every single person has it. So it's about looking after it.
Are you an advocate for putting something specific in the franchise agreement, for example, under the franchisor's obligations?
I would, yeah. I think I know some franchisors, even some here now, that have changed their franchise agreements to make sure that training is part of that. I worked with a franchisor recently who, as part of their franchise agreement renewal, they're getting people to upskill in that training so that actually they can carry on even when they've been in the network for 5, 10 years.
And also will be in the operations manual as well, then a section on mental health and mental
Yeah.
well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it doesn't have to be anything that's really complex or expensive. It can be guides to information and support that's going to be practical and helpful.
Yeah, I think in the manual and in the induction training, Simon,
Mm.
and then again in terms of, if you like, addressing expectations. So again, and anecdotal evidence, a long time ago when I used to be involved with the induction training and launch support, strangely enough with Poppies, Chris, I would say to the franchisees during training, just to let you know, the night before you actually start trading, you will not sleep. You will not sleep. You'll be so nervous. You'll feel like, awful. The next day you'll feel awful because you haven't had any sleep. So, get that into your head and expect it basically. And actually then when it happened, which it did, it was just part of the process for them and it was natural and they kind of embraced it almost. So again, on the first day of trading, whoever turned up to give them the bouquet of flowers or whatever, you could guarantee the franchisee would be there with like eyes on, because that's just the way that it is. And that's what we do when we're human, basically. But I think without the knowledge of that, we all think it's just me. Everyone else is great and it's just me. So I think there's a lot you can do.
As a franchisee or as a small business owner, you are exposed to potentially a lot more areas that can affect your mental health due to external factors, for example, things that you don't have control over. And I think if you've got the skills to be able to do that, I think it can only benefit. I just think it's going to be hopefully it won't be much of a challenge, but with some careful thinking about how the franchise model works, I think it can be implemented for sure.
Yeah, keep it simple. Chris, final thoughts as an established franchisor of many years.
I mean, you remember Sue Rorstadt very well. Sue, right the way through her developing the Poppies franchise, and I hope that I've picked up the mantle as well. I've tried to look after the well-being of our staff because it's critically important. It is a very fine line to walk, and this is the difficult thing. When somebody's got a mortgage problem, and you dig down into that, how far do you then go to help them with their mortgage problem? Do you try to give them some unqualified human to human advice when it's a regulated area, isn't it? So there are some really fine lines, but I think it's the human to human contact is the important thing, and the understanding that we can share. We get close to our franchisees. We develop more of a I think a friendship in a lot of cases. Okay, based around a business relationship to start with, but sometimes that can go into a friendship. And then it's almost important to be clear. I'm telling you this we're having this conversation as a friend over a pint rather than we're having this conversation as a franchise or franchisee.
And do you do anything in terms of induction training, that kind of manual content specifically around that, Chris?
I'm fascinated to see what Jen's got in the way of some guidelines, really, because we don't have anything in the manual. We do, as you know, Julie, probably talk about that nervousness and excitement and the alternating emotions that lead up to opening your business. And actually, are a common thread all the way through the recruitment process, really. People are excited and then nervous. They kind of want this and they back off for a while. But I think that continues even once they've made the decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it comes to me to finally, again, Jen, thank you very much for coming on today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Sharing that. That's all Jen's contact details, and she said award-winning in terms of EWIF and BFA, etc. So well done to you, Jen. You've had a great year.
Thank
And
you.
finally, looking forward, we're now moving towards 2025, and we are starting 2025 with our first Friday on Friday, the 10th of January, which actually isn't the first Friday of 2025, but we're giving Farah a bit of time because she's done so much travelling this year, and Farah's joining us as the guest to talk about international franchising, which is really what she's spent her life work dedicated to, and how not to do it, basically. So, and I'm sure as a result of her sharing her experiences with how not to do it, we'll also get lots of information about how to do it, and Farah's definitely an expert in the field. So yeah, thank you all very, very much for coming along. Thank